Judgment. I'm attorney Rachel Baird, and I am joined today by a Harwinton resident, Brooke Cheney, who is going to talk about her shooting school, her recent trip to DC, and your upcoming trip, correct?
Gosh.
Or have you already done it?
It depends. I'm so
Okay,
busy
we'll
this
get to
year.
it.
Well, yes, we'll go in order.
We're here summary judgment is here every Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m., and my co-hosts Ed Peruta and Matt Tyszkka are standing by, and they will join us later. But for now, I'd like to get started immediately. Brooke, you've been on the show before.
I have. Last year I think was my first time on when you and Ed were off at the NRA convention.
We were, and you joined Matt Tyszkka.
I did.
And
I
you
did.
two talked about a lot of legislative issues and political issues, I think.
Yes, we did.
Because both of you go up to the legislature and you attend hearings and you speak on behalf of pro-gun bills and against anti-gun bills, and everybody in Connecticut really appreciates that.
Oh, thanks.
That you two take the time to do that and do an excellent job.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like I really got into policy simply for the fact that I became a competitive shooter. And it's one of those things where, like the 10-round mag ban is a piece of legislation that the anti-gun people have been trying to get through our legislature here in Connecticut for a good 10 or 15 years. And so I went up because I'm a competitive shooter, and yes, I have magazines that hold more than 10 rounds, but I didn't know. I used to be one of those people that said, well, you still have ammunition in your gun. What does it matter whether you have 10 or more? Mm-hmm. And then I became a competitive shooter, and I'm like, oh, look, guns just naturally come with a 17-round magazine or an 8-round magazine based on the make and model of the gun, just like your car. Mm-hmm. Some people have a 4-cylinder, some people have a 6, some have an 8, and some have a Jag. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I started going and talking about gun legislation, is just as a competitive shooter. It really became an issue because traveling across state lines and traveling all over the country, it's just interesting, and I don't know, that's where I started, because we talked about it a little bit before the camera started rolling.
So why don't we talk a little bit about what you do, the name of your school, what its mission is, how long you've been in business, mm-hmm. and some of the things you focus on in training.
Okay. So the name of my school is A Great Start Shooting School. I officially opened my doors in January of 2014. My main focus is one-on-one training. Mm-hmm. A lot of people say, oh, do you do pistol permit classes? I'm like, well, I do, but I like to take people who already have their permits and get them to learn better marksmanship, better safety, because I find that I had my pistol permit since 1991. From 1991 until about 2007, I might have handled a gun 8 or 9 times. So just because I had my pistol permit, I know that doesn't mean that I just became a shooter because I have my pistol permit. So I had kids, and because of that, I'm like, I don't want to be that statistic of people who harm themselves with their own firearms in their home. So I knew I needed training. And I started getting more and more training, and then I got into competition, and then I became an instructor. And like I said, we opened the school in 2014, and I say we because I could not do it without my husband and my family supporting me.
Right.
Just to be able to have an easy place to go, friendly, private, one-on-one instruction. I have small classes when I do hold my pistol permit classes. There's no more than 4. But the idea was for after you have your permit, when you might be interested in the competitive shooting sports. I do introductory lessons for that sort of thing. But really, I think the real reason I opened my school was that first time I could pack up my bag to go to the range, and I knew I had everything I needed, And I was just like, oh, my husband didn't have to pack my bag for me. I was so excited. And I just felt so proud of myself for learning this and figuring this out. And I just want to share that with people.
Okay, and do you focus particularly on women learning to shoot, or both men and women, or do women just more naturally attract to your shooting school because it is run by a woman?
So initially, I was only going to teach women, just because I found that for the most part, men are so excited to see women on the range. It's like the best thing ever, and they get very excited. Unfortunately, some men are overly enthusiastic. So yes, I do. I did originally just cater strictly to women. However, my logo is pink and that sort of thing, and I had various guys come up and say, "Do you teach guys?" And I'm like, "Well, yes, I will teach guys." And then I've got moms come to me like, "Well, will you teach children?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'll teach children." So it originally started a woman for women shooters, and my clientele has grown to my youngest student at 7 and my eldest student at 83. And I have men and women who come for both the pistol permit class as well as just individual private training.
Well, as a lawyer, I have to tell you, I think it's good news that you are teaching both men and women, because I know you know about Ed Peruta's case that's waiting up at the Supreme Court to see if they're going to take it to be heard. And there's another case up there waiting to be heard. It's called Masterpiece Cake Shop. Have you heard of that?
I'm not sure I have.
It is a case where two gay men in Colorado went to a bakery and asked the bakery shop owner to make a cake appropriate for their gay nuptials. And the cake shop owner refused because he said, whatever he said, he didn't support gay marriage or whatever his position was on it. He said his religious beliefs prevented him from doing that. And the Colorado, Board of Human Rights ruled that discriminated against gay people. So, being in business, if you were to say, I'm just going to teach women and not men, I'd hate to see you subject to something like that. So it's good that you're all inclusive, and I'm happy for that. Plus, why not? If people want to learn, what difference does it make if they're a male or a female?
Absolutely. And I mean, and it's one of those things, we are very lucky here in Connecticut, and I know through the shooting sports, is that there are more female instructors out there. So it makes it a little bit easier. One of the purposes of my school also is to be a feeder school, because if you want to come and learn safety, you can come to me. If you want to come and learn basic, simple, hit your target sort of stuff, or just learn how to start shooting and moving, I can do that. But when you want to get into like tactics or self-defense and that sort of thing, that's where I send people off to other camps. Like, we have a camp coming up in August up in New Hampshire. It's called Babes with Bullets.
What with bullets?
Babes with Bullets.
Babes with Bullets, okay.
And it is an all-girls camp.
Okay.
Guys aren't allowed, although lots of them want to put skirts on and come because it is a lot of fun. And it's in Dunbarton, New Hampshire, and it has the world-class instructors, Kay Miklick, Lena Miklick. There are just amazing women, and the roster actually changes based on the camp, on who's not traveling somewhere in the world to shoot. But I mean, it's just, I like to get people confident enough to know that they can go to other training, because that was the other thing I found when I was brand new, was I would get a catalog and I'd look at it and I'm like, it would have prerequisites of saying this, and I'm like, I don't even speak that language yet, so I had no idea if I actually qualified to go to a training camp, so it was very intimidating. So at a Great Start Shooting School, what we want to do is get you not only confident in your abilities, but also say, okay, yes, you are absolutely safe enough, and they will happily take care of you at Babes with Bullets or at King 33 or whatever flavor of training you want to do above and beyond a Great Start Shooting School.
So how did you get involved in, I hate to say politics, but how did you get involved in advocacy or hearings on public issues, going to the General Assembly? What was there an issue in particular?
Yes, it was the 10-round mag ban that I started to talk about.
Oh, okay.
Because once I got into competition, I started being more aware of firearms, because prior to being in competition, my father raised me, and he was not spectacular about teaching all the safety, but we always had guns around the house. And so it was just part of my life. I didn't think much of it. And I remember in the early 2000s hearing chatter about a 10-round mag ban. And even though my family owned guns, I'm like, oh, who cares about 10-round mag ban? They still have bullets in their gun. What does it matter? And I was of that mindset of, oh, what impact does this make? They can still shoot, so who cares? And then I became a competitive shooter. And I started understanding how firearms come, how they're manufactured, why it really doesn't make any sense to limit me to being able to only buy a single gun in a month. Because as a competitive shooter, I have a backup gun. So it's like when I go to get a new gun for a division, I usually need 2 of them. It is not because I am some cold-blooded killer that I need 1 for each hand. It's that I need to have my competition gun and I need to have its twin. So because like next weekend we're talking about traveling, I'm going to Pennsylvania to Mid-Atlantic Sectionals. And so it's like you don't want to spend the time, the money, and the effort to drive to a competition and have your 1 gun break and not have your backup. Right. So that sort of thing. So it's like I started learning the everyday thing of being a real gun owner, as far as, oh, I actually use these tools. I need backups, just like I've got a spare tire in my car. I need my backup gun in my gun bag. So I think coming from what does it matter to understanding that, oh, this is why someone might buy 2 guns. It's not because they need twice as much firepower. It's because this is their backup, like their spare tire in their car. And so the first testimony I ever did was probably 2009 or 10 on the 10-round mag ban. And then Sandy
And then
Hook.
it finally passed, right,
Yeah.
in 2013, as we all know.
Right.
What have been some of the most important issues that you've testified about?
Oh, well, I think I learned the most after Sandy Hook, because as a mom, my kids were 5 and 6, and at the time that occurred, and the idea that someone was never going to see their kid again was horrendous. I must have cried literally for weeks, and I had to stop myself, because I'm like, all right, there's got to be something, because on the news and everywhere you heard, we must do something, and for me, as a mom and as a taxpayer, I'm like, well, let's do something that will actually work. So I started doing research. I looked into the FBI. I looked into the Department of Justice, Department of Education. I'm like, there'd been school shootings previously. What has been done? What is the research? What does it say? And I found FBI, DOJ, and Department of Ed kind of did a conglomerate study on the Columbine shootings originally. And they looked into what went wrong, how can we fix this, and they have a full report that you and I as taxpayers have paid millions of dollars for. And I'm like, well, look, here's some solutions right here. It talks about mental health, talks about community, it talks about communication, how important strong civil leadership is, communication between schools, the community, and the police are, that sort of stuff. Not anywhere in all of these reports that say anything about creating new laws. And so when I went to the multiple hearings after the Sandy Hook tragedy, we had a mental health day, we had a school safety day, and then we had a gun control day. I'm not sure what it was really called, but that's kind of how it ended up. And you just learn so much by going to these hearings, because the mental health day, for example, to me was the most important one. There was a woman from Sandy Hook, and she came up and she's like, my son is autistic, and he's high functioning, and she's like, I have a 12-year-old son, and I don't know that he's not going to be the next Adam Lanza, and I need help. And she's like, here in Connecticut, I don't know how to get help. It's like, she's up there, she's like, I will show you the bruises on my body from my 12-year-old, because he will try to attack his younger brother, and she has to get between them. And so she knows she has a violent child, and she can't get help. And so they talked about the need for reform for mental health and what can we do to help parents like that who are aware, because not a lot of people understand, like, Adam Lanza's mom was trying to get him committed. And then a year or two later, they started having hearings on voluntary versus involuntary committing here in Connecticut. And you would have testimony after testimony. And it was just interesting because you have one person come up and he's like, he was so thankful he had been committed against his will because it saved his life. And then you'll hear a couple more. And then another person will come up and testify and say, he was committed against his will, and he felt it took, because he wasn't ready, he felt it took his treatment a couple years backwards. So there's no easy answer.
There is
people
not when it
just
comes to
want
that.
the easy answer. So it's like the more I learn, I don't know there's any one thing that's the most important. It's just more information, more information.
Well, explain to me, because I was under the concept that in 2013 that there weren't really any hearings or public hearings, I guess, regarding the passage of 13-3. Now, these days that you went to, were they were public hearings that were held?
Yeah, so when December...
Because you've heard that they passed it in the middle of the night without public hearing, or...
So, let's see, because I honestly don't remember the date, because I'm not good with details like that. But so, Sandy Hook happened in December, the
Of
week
2012,
before Christmas.
right.
And then in 2013, they did have hearings. However, the passage of the bills that happened after that were deemed an emergency passage.
So there wasn't testimony on the exact provisions of the bills. There was general testimony about gun control, mental health,
and school safety.
And school safety, okay.
And so it was an opportunity for everybody to come forward and talk about these issues. You know, as I'm sure you know, they have like the commissioner of police come and talk about safety and the board of ed and that sort of thing. And, you know, some people want, you know, bulletproof glass everywhere and this sort of thing and armed guards and so on and so forth. So basically it's an opportunity for the legislators to hear what people have to offer and what their opinions are. But I don't believe those 3 days that I was there, we were necessarily testifying anything specifically.
Addressing any proposed bill language.
Yeah.
Right, okay, that makes sense. So since then, you've continued to testify. I know you've been over there. What have been some of the other issues that have come up? I know there was the increase in pistol permit fees that was on the radar
Governor's
this
budget,
year, yeah, and that did not pass, correct?
No,
as
it
far
did
as
not.
I mean, they're still
No.
working on the budget, right?
Right. So here's what has happened with that is by state statute, I think it is. I don't think it's federal. The state is allowed to charge us enough to cover administrative costs as far as what it takes to get our pistol permits. And the governor's budget came out with a arbitrary number.
Right.
And when they went to testify on this, they didn't have any answers as to where that number came from, but it was going to go from a little bit to a lot.
Well, I don't know if you say a little bit or not, because I don't think they've ever justified what they're charging now.
So yes, but I mean they wanted to jump to $350,
Right.
which was a lot, and a lot of good points were brought up during that conversation because it's like, well, where's this number coming from? And this is one of those things where they can charge you whatever it costs to actually push it through administratively, but they could not come up with any numbers that justified their desire to increase it.
Okay.
What has happened though is the permitting has gone away as far as that's been dropped. It's been dropped off the budget as an option. The one thing that has changed this year is the cost of background checks has gone up, but that's gone up across the board. So it's not just about pistol permits. It's all background checks. So,
Well, I'm not sure if you're aware, but Ed and I brought a lawsuit about this exact issue in federal court, that if you read the statutes, they really have no authority to be charging for background checks, because the statute says that the local police department or issuing authority shall investigate applicants for temporary pistol permits. And then there's another statute that says municipal police departments get their background checks for free from the state police. For example, if you get arrested, they do a background check on you. you don't have to pay for it, okay? Because the municipality gets it for free because they're asking for it. Well, they're the ones performing the background check. They're the ones asking for the record. I'm not asking for my record. I just want my pistol permit. I think you should, I'm telling you I don't have a record. So if you want to do a background check, that's fine with me, but that's your own thing that you want to do that for your own self-assurance. So why am I paying for that? But that was the court found that the gentleman that we brought the case on behalf of had paid his $50 fee, although it was under protest, and so they rendered it moot. So to me, the issue's never actually been decided, but they continue to charge the fee, and now you're telling me they're going to charge even more, even though there's no authority under the statute for them to be charging that fee.
Right.
So there you go.
Well, but I mean, like the part I was trying to get to though is the fact that it's not just for pistol permits. So it's like
well, but for the other ones, there's authority in the statute to do it. They actually say you have to pay this for background check if you're doing this or that. But for pistol permit holders, there's no authority to be charging them to investigate themselves because I'm not asking for the background check. The police department is,
right.
And it says the police department gets it for free. So I see what you're saying. It's okay for the other ones because there's authority in the first place for them to have to pay that fee. Pistol permit holders should not, or applicants should not be paying that fee because there's no authority. We should be different. So anyway, that irritates me
All right,
to
well,
no end.
We thought it was a win because for once
It
the
is
pistol
not a
permit
win.
we're
It's a
just not
continuing
getting.
loss. It's just a continuing loss. But anyway.
So
I'm
yeah,
sorry
it's
to
like
go off
no,
on that issue.
it's all good. I mean, and this is the thing is that people get excited about what they know about.
Right.
And this is why it's like, I'm very much the low information voter. I never would vote because I didn't feel I ever knew enough. And now that I start knowing more, I'm like, oh, you have to come vote. You have to come vote. How can you not
Well,
vote?
you're the head of the Republican Town Committee now. Look how far you've come.
That was a lot of I don't know how that happened. It's all Mike Chris's fault. Really it is.
So let's get to why
Okay.
I wanted you to come today, because you were recently back from a trip to Washington D.C.
Yep.
with a great purpose on a great mission. Tell us how you got involved. You've done it before. Tell us how it went this year.
All right, so the project you're talking about is the DC Project. It is a nonpartisan 2A female group. And it is 50 women from 50 states who all gather at the Capitol at the same time. And we go and we talk to our legislators because we are really looking to break the stereotype of gun owner in America.
Whoa, look at the picture we have up there.
Oh, all right. So this picture here is from our dinner that we had on Wednesday night. NSSF, which is based here in Connecticut, National Shooting Sports Foundation, sponsored our dinner in, we were in Virginia for this. And if you notice at the front row, there are all these little girls.
Yes.
And they are ages, 9, 12, 13, 14. And those are our junior shooters that came with us. And they got to go and meet with our congressmen and their senators and their competitive shooters, except for the little girl in the orange dress. That's my daughter.
I thought I recognized her.
Although all the way to the right, all the way to the left is Holly Sullivan, and she's my Connecticut counterparts. And then behind them are all the rest of the women. Not everybody was here for that picture because not everyone had arrived in town yet. But it's just amazing the diversity of women that show up for this thing and the stories. We've got, in that picture, you have competitive shooters, you have gun shop owners, you have resort owners, you have survivors, the women who tell their stories. It's just amazing, and they want to go to their senators and their representatives and be like, if I had a gun on me, I may not have been raped at gunpoint, and that sort of thing. And we also have stories of women who survived attacks because they were armed. And so it's like we've just got such a myriad of ages and religious leanings and political leanings and everything. It's just an amazing alphabet soup of America. and it is just very cool to bring everybody together once a year.
So this was last Wednesday when that picture was taken?
That was the night that the senator got shot, or the
Oh.
congressman got shot.
Well, we're going to get to that because
But yeah,
it just so
well,
happened.
I'm just saying that Wednesday was when we got all together.
It just so happened while you were in D.C. for this event.
Yeah.
The other event where the senator was shot happened too, and we're going to get to that and how it affected your message, if it did have any effect on your message while you were down there. So, what was the plan when you went down there to talk to your state representatives, right?
Yeah. So what we do is we take small groups of us, where, like myself and Holly Sullivan, because we're from Connecticut, we have a primarily anti-gun legislator to deal with, and then they'll send someone with us who's like from Texas or somewhere, so we get to see and expose our congressmen and our senators to different stories and different backgrounds and how things are working. So it's like you're not going by yourself, and the idea is to share a little bit of America with your congressmen and your senators. So we go in small groups of 3 or 4, depending on how scheduling works, because, our congressmen and our senators are very busy people.
Right.
Sometimes we meet with them directly. Other times, most of the times, we meet with their aides. And we just look to educate them. My daughter and I went down this time, and I was just going down for a range day that they had been invited to. And so on Wednesday, I went to go send out invites to have them come to the school for private lessons and information.
Here in Connecticut.
Here in Connecticut.
When they're back here in Connecticut
Right.
to come by.
Right. When Chris Murphy and Blumenthal are back, and Rosa DeLauro and all of them, Etsy as well.
Yeah.
Just because our purpose is not even so much to sway them one way or another, but just to let them know how important the Second Amendment is to us, and for them to at least be willing to hear or learn about the stuff that they seem to be so afraid of. So our purpose in the DC project is really to educate, because we are women from all walks of life.
And so how did that work out?
I don't know. I haven't heard from Holly yet.
Okay.
Originally, I was supposed to be there all this week, because the meetings were set for Thursday and Friday, and then there was a rally on Friday. And what happened was, because of all the snow days here, my son's graduation from grammar school to middle school ended up being this Thursday. So I was just only down there to hand out invitations for the range day. Holly Sullivan, however, was the one who actually got to sit down and meet with the different aides and travel around. So
Okay, so we'll have to catch
it's only
up with
Saturday,
her.
yes,
And
yes.
when will she be back?
I'm not even sure. I think she's home now, and it's been crazy busy. As we were talking before camera started rolling, and it's like I just got from the Harwington Rod and Gun Ladies' Day here in Harwington to here. So those of us who are active, we tend to be very active. So it's a little bit hard to slow down and to catch up and chat. So
Now, did you do the DC project last year?
yes, this is my second
Your
year.
second year. And last year, who did you talk to?
Last year, Chris Murphy was actually the one person who met with us in person. Everybody else that we talked to, we just talked to aides. Like we talked to Blumenthal's aide. It was a year ago, so we actually didn't meet with as many last year as we were scheduled to this year. But I was very impressed that Mr. Murphy was meeting with us directly, and he, like I said, he was the only one who actually took the time to talk to us directly. We agreed to disagree on things. One of the things I like about Senator Murphy is the fact that he's the only politician I've actually heard talk about mental health, and the fact that we need to build something up, because we took away the asylums, and we have now people living under bridges, or the violent ones living in the prisons. And, the fact that he at least recognized that. So we have some common ground, even if it's not over firearms. So for me, I try to make this a bridge building event versus saying, well, you don't agree with us, so we don't like you, sort of thing. Which unfortunately I find America is terribly polarized in that way on lots of issues. It's not just firearms.
Well, definitely. And for our next half hour, what we're going to do is we're going to have Tyszkka join us. Matt Tyszkka, as you know, because you've done a show with him and you know him anyway, he's a retired lieutenant colonel of the Connecticut State Police, and he has a lot of insights into things like happened down in D.C. This week, and you can discuss that and tell us how it was to be there and what you observed in terms of how it affected your mission and whether it affected it or not, and how they started to spin the situation immediately as it happened. So we're gonna go maybe back to your picture there,
Okay.
or another picture, and that'll give us time to scoot another seat on here for Matt to join us.
See if Master Patrol's listening or not.
I
Right?
hope they are.
Yeah.
There we go.
There
Perfect.
it
Look,
is.
somebody is
I
listening to us,
know.
Brooke. Okay.
Well, hey,
here we
these
go.
things. My batteries, because being political and being in politics stuff super challenging, and to meet all these amazing women, and the stories are just awesome. They range from little girls who are in competition and really good at it to let's see, to women who just decided they needed to start something new. And it was funny because some of the stories were about weight loss, that they got they got into competition and they lost a whole bunch of weight. So I mean, we have all different experiences and excitement over what guns have done for us. And so it's just awesome to get together with all of them.
Well, that was smooth. I like the way that worked. We did a good job. Okay.
I think we
good
planned
segue.
that.
Well, nice
You
to
like
see
that?
you, Matt. This is Matt Tyszkka. I've already introduced you to everyone, and you join us here every Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. So regular viewers know exactly who you are, Matt. I wanted to bring you on because I was not aware that Brooke had just been down there this week in D.C. And she was down there when the incident, of course, happened, the shooting
Yeah, that's
incident.
interesting.
And so I thought we could have you on to first have Brooke tell us what it was like to be there, and then how the situation started to be spinned by the different partisan sides. And then Matt, you can come in and talk a little bit about your perspective on it from reading the news and hearing about it and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, so Tuesday night, went to bed knowing that in the morning I was going to get up and I was going to go into our senators and our congressmen's offices and hand out these invitations to come learn about firearms. The little introductory letter I have on the invitation says, I'm not interested in talking politics, I just would like to share some education with you guys. And then Wednesday morning I wake up and I pick up my phone, and my friend, one of my students actually, had texted me saying, hey, did you hear about this? And I just look and I see that there's been a shooting of a congressman that morning, that I'm about to walk into DC and invite them to come to my range. So I immediately got a little bit nervous because I'm like, wow.
Timing, yeah,
The
timing's not good.
the timing was just like, I find it challenging enough to go do what I was about to go do without a shooting being the headline of the day when I'm about to go do this. And my friend who I was staying with, she's afraid of guns. She is very liberal, and she and I talked about it because I'm like, I don't know if I should do this. I really didn't. And she's like, Brooke, you're fine. You're not condescending. You don't talk down to people and make them feel stupid just because they don't agree with your views. She's like, just go ahead and do it. I'm like, are you sure? Really? So I needed a cheerleader
Right.
on Wednesday
Yeah.
morning.
Well, it was good to have a support friend like that.
I needed my cheerleader, and that's someone who's quote, from the other side. And it's just like, I don't see any of my friends as from the other side, but unfortunately lots of people go that way. And so it's like, so I talked to her, and she sort of helped calm me down, which was awesome. And then I got in the car and I called my brother. And I'm like, dude, this is hard. And you know, my brother and I are both Christians, and so we prayed on the way into DC. And you know, it's like, you're there for a purpose. Just go forth and stand strong. And so it's like, so I had my counseling in the morning before I got to DC, because it was very disheartening to know that someone just got shot, and I want to
Of
go
course.
talk about firearms.
Of course.
And so it's like I walked into each one of those offices and I'm like, hi. And I think half the time I forgot to even introduce myself. I'm like, I don't have an appointment. I just wanted to hand off an invitation in person. And then I'm like,
So what actual offices do you go in to do that? I'm just trying to picture this. The Congress?
yep. So all the congressmen and all
Okay. Okay.
all the senators have their own offices, and so they're segregated. So on one side of the street, so it's like if you're standing and looking at the Capitol, on one side is all the senators, and on the other side are all the congressmen.
What's the security like to get in there? I mean, you go
You
through a
just
metal
walk through
detector?
a metal detector.
Okay. Do you have to tell people? Do you have to tell them why you're there?
No.
So it's pretty open.
We paid for those buildings. We get to walk right
No,
in.
no.
As of today,
No, let me tell you, it's not that way in a lot of places.
Yeah,
If you go to
true.
the federal courthouse at 450 Main Street in Hartford, they will ask you what you're doing there, where you're going. You know, I go in a lot of public buildings. I am told that Bridgeport City Hall, to get in there, they have to know why you're there. Do you have an appointment? So there are a lot of public buildings where
well,
now I don't know what.
Not so much in DC.
I don't know what they would do if you challenged it. If you went through and you said, "I'm not telling you what I'm doing here," I don't know what would happen. So anyway, that's why I
Yeah.
asked. I just wanted to see.
No. I mean, there's metal detectors. Everyone was prepared for heightened security for Wednesday, because not all of us. Some of us had appointments for Wednesday, because like me, we had other scheduling conflicts that we couldn't be there on Thursday and Friday with the rest of the group, and the security wasn't any different in the buildings. Outside on the streets, it was definitely different. There was, as I was getting closer to the congressional building, I couldn't go across a certain block. I had to be diverted around, and there's just, I have actually, sorry I didn't send you the picture, but I actually have a picture of my daughter standing next to a gentleman with his AR on him. And it's like, well, I shouldn't say AR, with his rifle on him outside the building. So that was different from last year. So there was heightened security, but it didn't impact our moving from building to building or anything like that. So I just walk in the building, go through the metal detector, put your bag, it's like going to the airport. You put your
Right.
bag through the x-ray, and that's it. It's like going to the Hartford building the way it is now. It's no different. You don't have to be going anywhere. You can just go in and look around. The cafeteria is really good. But so
In both buildings, or
I've only done Congress. I don't know about the Senate side, but so I just walk up and there's directories, and you just go find the room where they are, and they're in different rooms every year. So you need the directory. NSSF again was very cordial in supplying us with those things. So yeah, you just go around, walk in, say hi, my name is Brooke, and I'm just here to drop off some invitations to my range back home. I know the senators, or congressman is very busy. However, the invitation was to the staff as well, because the staff are very important and an integral part of their lives, because as a congressperson or a senator, you don't have time to research everything. Your staff is super important to be educated. And it was very cool going to everybody, because 99.9% of all the staff I talk to are from Connecticut. They're just interning or temporarily down in DC. So it's kind of neat to find out that, oh, well, you're actually from Connecticut and you're working in our Connecticut office. Yay!
yeah, definitely.
So,
Or you're actually from Harwinton. Drop by.
there you go. So it was fun.
Now, did you hear any talk or about the incident while you were down there? Did anybody talk to you about it, or?
No, the monitors. On every monitor is whatever the current news of the day is. Like we were talking about before, last year when we were in DC, the Dallas shootings had happened like the day before we started going and doing our visitation. So it's just like whatever the news of the day is, every office has at least one monitor going at all times of whatever the current day is.
Well, Matt, when you heard about the incident on Wednesday, now it's my understanding there were 2 members of the Capitol Police that were there, and that they were responsible for shooting and killing the shooter.
Right.
And that those two members of the Capitol Police were there just for the protection of, is it Senator Scalise?
Yes.
Okay, is
A
he a
rep.
senator or rep? I think he's a rep.
I
God,
think
we
he's
should
a
know
rep.
this. Yeah, I think so too. Representative Scalise. And they were just there for him. And that if Representative Scalise hadn't been there, then there wouldn't have been any Capitol Police there necessarily.
That's my understanding. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, this is people. The other side always makes fun of our statement that the only thing to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Well, this was a classic case of where good guys with guns actually stopped further carnage. I don't know all the details, just what I've read. I'd like to see a map and a sketch of exactly who was where. But it seems like the Capitol Police definitely reacted well, quickly. They were proficient in their firearms. They knew their tactics, and they actually took out the gunman before he got to shoot more people. If they hadn't been there, then nobody was armed. I mean, they're playing softball. Nobody wears a firearm while they're playing softball or bowling or anything like that. So they would have just been sitting ducks. And now it came out that when they did the crime scene, they searched the shooter's body. He had a list of, I think, 6 or 7 more Republican targets that he was going to go after. So I don't know yet if he specifically targeted Scalise or he just wanted to get to the practice where there were a bunch of Republicans.
Right.
But then on the heels of this, they had out in Indianapolis a guy with a Trump pickup truck or something riding around, and some people pulled up to him and shot the truck up. Then the New Jersey Democratic operative, they called him. Apparently he had run for office once before, but he's been involved in a bunch of Democrat campaigns. He came out publicly after the shooting and said, time to hunt Republicans. So there's definitely a war on. If you're identified as someone, not necessarily Republican, anybody who doesn't disagree with the Antifa or the left wing of the country, you are a target. Either
Well,
for getting beat up, verbally assaulted, or possibly shot.
I mean, I'm going to still choose to believe that these people are on the fringe. That you have people like that who were anti-Obama when Obama was in, and those people, when they acted, certainly weren't reflective of conservatives or Republicans as a whole. And I don't believe that the shooter or the people that you're talking about in Indianapolis are reflective of liberals or Democrats as a whole. I choose to believe that, and I hate when these things happen to try to spin it and say, look, the liberals are after Republicans or after conservatives, and they're all that way, and they're all horrible, because when people choose to do these things, they are mentally ill. They're aberrations. They're not your average, certainly by any means, liberal or Democrat. That's what I still choose to believe. And I don't know. What's your viewpoint on that?
Well, one of the stories that I got to hear on Wednesday, because we all got to get up and tell our stories as to how we got there. And one of the stories that this makes me think of is the girl was saying how she was at a party and people started talking and their conversation sort of got darker and darker. But because we're taught to be polite, that she's like, oh, this doesn't seem quite right, but it just got worse and worse. And she didn't get out of there because, like, your belief system of people are generally good, even, people may say stuff in jest, it's probably not serious, that sort of thing. And she ended up getting attacked. And it's really hard because I hate stereotypes with a passion, because they're never the true story. However, one of the challenges is the stereotypes are there for a reason, because enough of the same type of people have created the same type of environment around them. I am very lucky to have been raised around lots of different people from lots of different cultures all over the place. My friends and I, we have this conversation and we're like, really? we all agree on 80% of things, whether you're talking race, religion, political leanings, all of that. I don't think any of us really care for violence. I don't think any of us want more than to have a roof over our head, clothes on our body, and that sort of thing. And in the entire population of the world, there's this little tiny piece of 2% that are evil people that will do things like 9/11, and they don't fit into a box other than they're evil.
And I think that 2% can widen its influence when you have a population that feels like they're not being heard. You know, that feels like they're being denied their rights. That little bit can widen it to maybe more that actually has, not that the 2% can't have an impact, but as they widen their scope, it has a lot more impact and can upset the order. There's no doubt about it.
Well, and another one of the conversations we've been having also is the fact the media focuses on the school shootings. They focus on death, destruction, who got killed in the car accident. If it bleeds, it leads, is something that's very big in our culture. And so you hear about all these horrible things, the fire in London, the trucks in Paris, just pick a day and there's probably something horrific that occurs. The challenge is no one ever puts it in perspective of how many people got home that day, how many soldiers did come off the field today, how many kids got straight A's in school today. We don't look at, the media in general doesn't often look at what's good in our lives and so we get that slanted percent. So even if the 2% doesn't have a bigger impact, the media absolutely can make it so that 2% can expand what their impact truly is. Because, how many multiple shooters do you find alive?
But on the other hand, if you accept that philosophy, what you're basically saying is that most things are good. There is a small percentage of bad things that happen, and those things are going to happen. They're part of the natural order. So why are we focused on them so much? Why don't we focus on the good things? But I think people focus on the bad things because they want to believe that they can somehow make these bad things stop. And so they focus on them in an effort to try to bring out some point of view of how to make the bad things stop, not just accept them as part of what's going to happen in the world, even though since the beginning of history, it seems like that point has been driven home that there's always going to be bad things that happen. We're never going to have a time where bad things aren't happening. It's just our lot as human beings, but I think people can't accept that. And rightfully so, I guess. I guess I don't want people, for hunger, poverty, it's always going to be here, but people can't accept it, and they're always trying to find ways to fix it by talking about it or by showing it or doing studies about it or whatever.
Yeah, and I agree with Brooke. Stereotyping does you a disservice if you stereotype, because you're missing a lot of things going around it if you just blanketly pick people. But you still have to be aware that 2% of say radical people in this country, say anti-democratic, anti-constitutional rights, 2% of those, I don't know how many it is, but let's just say there's 1,000. It's probably a conservative estimate. 1,000 people willing to do violence running around the country and proving they're going to do violence, that's a realistic risk that you don't have to be paranoid about it, but you have to be aware, keep your situational awareness up, and you have to realize that you could be a target because there are a number of people running around that you don't know when, where they're going to show up, that take exception to you and your beliefs, and they're not crazy, they're not insane, they may be irrational, but they plan these things out. Like this guy down in Washington, he wasn't crazy. He was perfectly sane. He was, everything worked according to his plan. It's irrational, certainly illegal, immoral, what he did, but he had it all planned out, and he actually did what he set out to do, and if he could have, he would have escaped. So, it's not just mentally ill people. There's a lot of mentally ill types, people that are not violent. They don't cause a problem.
Right.
But there are a lot of sane people even psychopaths are generally sane, but they're psychopaths, and this is what makes them dangerous. So you have to be aware of it, because like Ayn Rand said, you can deny reality, but you can't deny the effects of reality. So, you know, just be aware.
I worry about people like Maxine Waters and other representatives
Oh, yeah.
like that who seem to be on a mission to agitate and provoke this kind of conduct that may be on the edge, or people may not be completely comfortable to do, but they feel encouraged by the formal renunciation of President Trump and vilification of him. They feel comfortable attacking him and people who they see as supporting him. And I think that's a disservice to our country, conduct like that. I really do.
Yeah, it is, and that's the thing that should concern us, is because there are people on the edge, or see people who are just by their nature subject to influence. And when you get people giving them permission to use violence against somebody that doesn't agree with them, when you encourage them to use violence against somebody who doesn't agree with them, they can cloak themselves in that moral mantle, saying, my collective. They've got their arms around me, hugging me, and they're telling me it's okay, and I'm going to go out and prove them right. I'm going to feel good. There are people like that, and that there's nobody to tell them, hey, knock it off, stop it. They're just being encouraged by their people. So there's a lot of different factors in there, but the fact is they exist, and everybody's in danger if you're in a class of people that's targeted.
Right. So, have we said all we can say about this issue? Anything you want to follow up on?
Well, no, I mean, all I was thinking is what he was just describing is the gang mentality. It is that the riots that we've had over the past 8 years, how old am I? I'm 46 years old. And in my entire life, I don't remember a time when we've had so many riots and upheavals and just general unrest in America as a whole. But as I said before, I was very uneducated as a younger person. I didn't really pay attention to the news. I didn't really pay attention to politics. I didn't pay attention to that. So it's like, I don't know if it's because I'm paying more attention to it or not, but the gang mentality is definitely out there.
Yeah.
As far as, okay, I don't agree with you, so I'm going to get a bunch of my friends who don't agree with you, and we're going to fix that. And I've never understood it, but it's just like, I think you summed it up very well with the whole idea that if one person who has a leadership quality to them voices their opinion, there are absolutely people that will happily follow them to make themselves feel better. So it is interesting. I definitely find the challenge with politically correctness, because we're all allowed to voice our opinions and no one can challenge them. I'm afraid that we've lost a little bit of respect, because I'm sure you guys all saw it, that awful comic with the beheading of
I was going to bring that
President
up.
Trump.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I whether you like Trump or don't like Trump, the beheading of any American president in jest by an American is really distressing. So, I mean, but it goes back to respect, in my opinion.
Well, civility. Society has lost a lot of its civility toward everything, because, and it's probably a combination of a lot of things, but, it started in the 60s and 70s, and I don't know, you're probably, you may not remember the time during the 60s and 70s. There were a tremendous number of bombings and riots during that time. But it was more against the establishment in general. It wasn't against a particular class of person. But that attitude carried over. Now those people who were rioting, they've been in charge of the school system for years, and they've been in charge of the news media for years, and they've gotten themselves into politics over the years. And they've given permission to act this way, to think this way, to be rude. It's okay if you're rude. It's okay if you commit serious violations. All you have to do is apologize, and you're expected to be forgiven. Well, that's an abuse of the forgiveness issue. Because if you can do anything you want, same thing with the Catholic Church, whether you believe in it or not, you can do anything you want, just go to confession, your sins are forgiven. Well, I don't know about that, but it's the same type of mentality. But it doesn't work, and there's no obligation on my part to, if somebody, whacks me or does something and then says, whoops, sorry, I don't have to accept that apology because it's not a sincere apology. The apology was used just to mask them, give them political or even legal cover maybe for doing what they did intentionally.
Hey Matt, and since Brooke is here as well, and you two go to the legislature a lot, your use of the word whack made me think of the swatting bill that was up. Were you involved in that at all?
I
Or did
was
any
not.
testimony? Matt was. Now it
Yeah.
started out seemingly a really negative bill for gun owners, and then it seemed to get better, and it passed.
No, that wasn't it. The swatting bill started off pretty well.
It did, okay.
I talked to, I proposed it to several legislators, and Senator Kevin Whitcoast actually introduced it, and it went through a hearing. I think there were only like 2 or 3 witnesses at the hearing on swatting, but we pushed it through and everything, and they did finally push it. I guess it's right up on the governor's desk now.
Oh,
for
so it hasn't
signature.
actually been signed.
Right, not actually. I guess it's right up on his desk.
And what does that prohibit?
What it does is it enhances like the false complaint statute. I think it's like 53A 180, something like that. And what it does is makes person liable if somebody knowingly makes a false complaint in order to get a large-scale public safety response, 5 or more public safety first responders, then they could be charged with a Class D felony, and they are financially liable to the entity that responded, or entities. So there's like a civil component to it. Beside being criminally charged, now you're liable for the cost of the response.
So it could definitely cover a lot more ground than just reporting somebody has a gun. I mean, it could apply to a lot of situations, but
Oh, yeah.
I think the impetus behind it was people calling up about, oh, somebody has a gun.
Right. A lot of people do know that carrying a pistol is perfectly legal, but there were calls a year or two over the past couple of years by various gun right groups, not necessarily in Connecticut, but in other places, saying, if you see a person with a gun or you think he's doing, call
Right.
the police, breathlessly and say, there's a man with a gun, there's a man with a gun over here right now, and all the cops would come or whatever, and, it turned out to be nothing. The other parts where swatting started actually was like with some disgruntled gamers and stuff. They get mad at somebody, and they could be in Germany. They'd call up the police in Palo Alto, California. They found out where the people live. Say this guy he just shot somebody. They're holding his family hostage and
Right.
stuff. And the cops all go there, SWAT teams surround him, and the guy comes out in his underwear and says, "What are you doing here?" And that's the type of thing. And those types of situations are dangerous because the police are going in there expecting possibly to have violent resistance.
Oh, yeah.
Meanwhile, nothing is going on. A homeowner doesn't know
He's
what's
definitely
going
in
on.
danger, though, with that
Oh, yeah.
response.
Yeah, somebody could get shot, either cops or, homeowner. So it encompasses any complaint where you knowingly make a false complaint to get somebody in trouble, and it's more than a prank. This is a dangerous situation. Not only that, but my explanation to the legislature, the committee, was, when you have a call like that, police, fire, EMS, they're speeding to the scene. They're trying to get there as fast as possible because there's a crime in progress. It puts everybody in danger, the responders and the motoring public and pedestrians. So there's danger right from the call all the way through to the end of the incident.
Well, that's an argument that the Wallingford Police Department used when Rich Burgess was arrested at the Yale Billiards Hall in 2010. He was openly carrying his pistol. He had a permit. He was in the billiards hall. There's nothing illegal about that. And the billiards hall owner called the police and said, he wasn't even that concerned about it. There had just been a bail bondsman or a bail enforcement agent who was in the billiards hall who said you can't open carry in Connecticut. It's illegal to open carry in Connecticut. So the hall owner, nobody panicked or anything.
And the hall owner was a permit holder.
Yeah, and he called the police, And when I was deposing one of the police officers, I was saying, what did he do illegal? What was wrong, or this and that? And he said, well, the fact that we had to drive there, with our sirens on, put people in danger. And I'm thinking, you're putting that on Rich Burgess, who did nothing illegal. The fact that you had to drive there fast, and it just seemed ridiculous at the time. But now I see what you're saying as well. If somebody calls the police maliciously, knowing there's nothing going on, then it should be put on them. Of course, Rich Burgess wasn't the one who called the police; somebody else did.
Right.
So I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
but I have heard that argument before.
Well,
Definitely.
and Rich wasn't doing anything wrong. I mean, hopefully.
And he didn't call the police.
Well, that's true, and hopefully, most people in Connecticut now will not look at that as an emergency. But if you say a guy just shot somebody, he's holding a family hostage.
Yep.
Different story.
Yep.
It's not just a guy with a gun.
Yep.
It's something going down here.
Okay,
So,
Brooke. So we're at the end of your hour here. What's next for you? I heard you say that you're going to Pennsylvania for a competition.
Yes,
right.
yes. So I just got back from DC on Thursday morning around 4:30. We just did Harwington Rod and Gun Club Ladies Day today.
Which I did not know about.
I'm sorry. Well,
I don't think I heard about that.
I tried to put it up on my Facebook page, but I did not. I didn't do it well. A good job. But we'll work on that for next year. But
Okay.
they usually have it somewhere around this time of year every year. And so there's that. And then I will be packing to go to Pennsylvania on Thursday because we'll take off on Friday, drive down there for Mid-Atlantic Sectional, which is a USPSA.
Where is it going to be then? Where in
Yeah,
Pennsylvania?
my husband's driving. I don't need to know.
Oh, okay. Okay, we'll leave it at that. You'll get out when he stops, right?
Details.
Okay.
My mom laughs at me because she's like, "How do you get anywhere?" And I'm like, "Because I care about it when I need to get there.
GPS.
I've got a week yet before I have to worry about that." I'm like,
Okay.
"No, I'm going to Pennsylvania. That's as much as you're getting out of me right now."
That's pretty
We're
detailed.
going by Hershey. We always go by Hershey Park on our way
So you
down.
know that,
much
yeah.
I can tell you.
Do you stop and ask directions at all?
No, not
You don't?
generally.
No,
No.
women always do, and the guys get in
No.
trouble for not.
So my daughter and I
thought
were
it was the other
discussing
way.
getting lost, and this is what, if you ask my 9-year-old what happens when you get lost, she's like, it's just another opportunity for an adventure.
There you go.
So
Smart
it's
kid.
okay that we get lost from time to time because we do drive in circles. But anyway, so that will be Mid-Atlantic Sectional. July will be the best time to come get a lesson at a Great Start Shooting School because we'll actually be around. And then August and September we do a lot more additional competitions across the country.
What's the website address for your shooting school?
The short one is
Okay.
Sure.
agSS.com. So,
agSS.com.
Right.
And people can learn more about it there.
Right, and it's actually it's getting redone, so it's going to change soon. But the long one is you can just type in agreatstartshootingschool.com, and it'll get you there as well.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah,
joining us,
thanks
Brooke.
for
And
coming.
if you could contact Holly and ask her if she'd like to call into our show next week or report back to you and you report back to us. However we can get information about how Thursday and Friday went, I'd be really appreciative of that.
All right, I will
Yeah.
see what I can do.
So we're going to put a picture up because that worked out so
While
well.
we do the
And
edge
then
job.
we're going to switch.
Yep. Thanks
It's
for
gonna be like
joining us.
magic.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for joining us, Brooke. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Well, it's a picture. Thanks so much, Brooke. Yeah, you're back on that.
Video your competition.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Oh, that's right.
I'm switching with Matt.
Yeah, if you have some video, we can put it up.
Yeah, that would be great.
All right, I'll work on that for next time.
You know your way out.
I do.
Take care, Brooke.
Push in, we gotta go. Here we go.
We're hot.
Well,
Okay,
here we
back
are,
to
again.
back to hour 2 of summary judgment, June 17th, 2017, from the Media Center in Harwinton, Connecticut. And I'm going to save Rachel the trouble. I'm Ed Peruta, and I gave up my seat for Brooke Cheney.
Yeah, the first hour we had an interesting conversation with
Yes.
Brooke Cheney of a Great Start Shooting School here in Harwinton. She talked about her trip to D.C. with women from all over the country with the mission to educate our congressmen and congresswomen about shooting, competitive shooting, caring for self-defense, and everything else that comes along with gun ownership and possession.
And I told her as she was leaving, shoot cell phone video, high definition cell phone video of the competition. Give us the clips, and we may be able to show them on Saturdays what Brooke is doing.
Yep, she's going to a competition in Pennsylvania this Thursday, so we look forward to that.
So let's go back to the. I've been sitting here listening to this.
I saw
So
that.
let's go back to Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
The radical elements of the left and right have a tendency towards confrontation and violence, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican. But the one thing that I take away from Washington, D.C. is, regardless of who he was employed by, or who they were employed by, there was somebody there with a firearm to protect the people that didn't have one. That is, in my mind, the aspect that people have to look at. How bad would it have been had there been no legal firearms at that ball diamond?
Sure. Matt, but the Capitol Police, what do they do? What is their jurisdiction? What do they do exactly? I mean, they have a role in D.C. that's limited to the area around the federal buildings.
Well, we have the Capitol Police in Hartford.
Right.
They don't go out and enforce state statutes in the city of Hartford.
Right.
They're basically on the grounds of the state capitol, which includes the executive and legislative branch,
Mm-hmm.
and judicial. That's their jurisdiction. So when a ranking member, because the whip in the House is number 3, when the whip goes out someplace, he is in fact in the succession line to the president. President, vice president, Speaker of the House.
Now, somebody sent me a text with this order last week, how it goes. There's like 20 people down
Right.
it goes through.
Right.
I don't have it handy this week, though.
Well, it's there
Mm-hmm.
for anybody. A lot of people know how to use Google.
Right.
There is a lot going on. There's been a lot
You
going
know,
on.
what I was thinking of, we had an issue with the Hartford Civilian Review Board, and there was some controversy about one of the members on the Hartford Civilian Review Board who was a sworn officer. He worked for the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, and there were some comments by Hartford police officers that, oh, you're not a real cop, you don't patrol the rough, mean streets of Hartford like we do. And we kind of got into a conversation about that, where, is there a hierarchy among police officers where, for instance, if you work in New York City, maybe in, the worst area in New York City, you have like bragging rights over everybody else, and if you work for some place in the middle of nowhere in the Midwest, although the drug problem in the Midwest is terrible, so I don't know if there's any place that's really great right now, but let's say you work at a place like Mayberry RFD, you're just at the lowest part of the totem pole and you don't have any bragging rights, even though you're all law enforcement officers. And we saw that kind of ugliness come out in that whole discussion where it was law enforcement officer pitted against law enforcement officer, like who's the biggest and baddest because I work in this area and you work in that area. And I thought about this when there's the line of succession up there right now on Google. But I thought about this when these 2 Capitol police officers were involved in this immediate situation that required a instantaneous response. And they could have blown it. They could have gotten nervous. I mean, I want to go out on a limb and say that the Capitol Police are probably not in life and death situations every day. That a lot of them probably go through their entire
Directing
career.
tourists.
Yeah, a lot of them probably go through their entire career without being faced with the day-to-day interactions that, for example, New York City police officers or Hartford police officers face. And, I just imagine that certain police officers may look at Capitol Police, like Hartford police officers were talking about Department of Mental Health and Services police, as, those guys are they're not real officers. They just like shuffle people through buildings and do all this kind of stuff. But we saw last week that it's kind of like, and I haven't been in combat, but I've listened to Ed, I've read books, I've seen movies. It's kind of like, you know what, there's a lot of downtime, but when the time comes where there's something happening, you got to be ready.
Well,
you got to be ready,
let me-
and that's what you're there for. And these two Capitol police officers were ready, and they were there. And so for law enforcement to look at other law enforcement in a way, oh, you're not as tough as us because you're just this or that. Well, you know what? You're all in the same boat, and you all have to be ready for that moment.
Yeah.
Well, let me
Exactly.
just clarify. 1,000 recruits go into a new recruit class for the New York City Police Department, and a percentage of those recruits are going to go to the New York City Transit Police Department and work the subways, the train stations, and they're not going to be out on the streets dealing with things every day. I mean, there's enough going on the subways, but still, there, and I don't think when you get solicited into the academy, you know where you're going to be assigned. And I can tell you,
What do you think? Do you
No,
know?
it's, yeah,
Say no?
well, they consolidated a few years ago, Transit Police, the Housing Police, and New York City Police Department. They all kind of merged. So you're right. Nowadays, before you used to join one or the other, and even the Port Authority Police
Right.
down there, even though I think they have their own academy. But yeah, you go in there, and I guess you get an assignment, and you can rotate in and out as you go along, right?
well, I can tell you a factual story. The Marine Corps is capped at, I believe, like 190,000 men. It's not meant to be big.
And women.
It's capped.
That's right.
But
Well,
it's
that's
capped.
right, yeah, there's
But
women.
it is capped. And after the Tet Offensive in 1968, there were a lot of casualties, and they needed to put in a replacement. They had to call in a replacement draft. They had to go back into the States and find people to ship over to fill the slots where guys were killed and wounded, to come in and say, okay, here I am. Well, there is something that you are taught in Marine Corps boot camp. Every single Marine is nothing more than a basic rifleman. They are all required to go through Marine Corps recruit training, and they are basic riflemen. John Glenn is reported when he was complimented about circumventing the earth. He said, I'm just a rifleman. Don't look at me as a pilot. I'm just a rifleman.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happened was they pulled together.
I think we have a caller. Do you want to take the caller?
Let me just finish this statement.
Okay.
They pulled together a replacement draft of basic riflemen and sent them into Vietnam because they came in and replaced my outfit, who was decimated on February 6th and during Tet. So we were going to move out. They were going to replace us. So we had to work side by side to kind of teach them the lay of the land and how it worked. Well, I remember guys saying to me, I'm an airplane mechanic. Another guy says, I'm a cook. Another guy says, yeah, and I'm, I work, yeah. They were not infantry, mud marines, trained, hardcore, no. Buddy, we need a person with a rifle in Vietnam. You may be a clerk in payroll, but pack your gear, you're on your way. And the 27th Marines were composed of replacement individuals who were never trained extensively in combat operations. They replaced us, and they had a hard time getting up to speed. So we have the phone call.
Yep.
Up.
Line 2.
Okay, what's going on? Summary judgment. No.
Line 2, I was blinking.
Summary judgment.
Hello, this is Matt.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. is it all right if this is Matt Valentine? We've talked before. Is it all right if we talk a little bit?
Well,
Hi,
Matt,
Matt,
are
how
you
are
watch?
you?
Are you watching us on? Are you watching us on internet?
I am. There's a little lag between. It's like a minute or two behind on the.
Right. You got to
screen.
turn your volume. You got to turn your volume down because there's a delay.
Yeah. So.
So let me
Right now?
let me introduce everybody to who you are. You are Matt Valentine, and I believe, are you an independent journalist?
I am. I'm a freelancer. Yeah.
You're a freelancer, like I'm a stringer,
Yeah. I mean.
and you are
I've done some
current.
stringing as well.
You write articles for Politico. Do they have a hard copy magazine and an online presence, or just online?
Well, they have a physical paper that is only out in D.C. in the districts, but they're mostly read online. It's mostly an online publication.
Okay, so you have been trying to interview me, and I've kind of been told that I can't. But this is a program that we do regularly. I know that you've spoken to Rachel.
We did. We had a nice conversation yesterday.
And here I am, Matt, being interviewed. I'm sure going to be asked some questions by Politico Magazine on the air, live on the internet.
Great. So let's talk first about this case, American News versus San Diego, versus Gore, which is a First Amendment case. And the question I have for you, I mean, this case has been appealed and it's made its way up to the Ninth Circuit. And can you tell me what will change for you if the court, rules in your favor with this case? How it's going to affect you, or how it might affect other people?
Okay. We live in the 21st century. And in the 21st century, high definition quality cameras are in almost everyone's hands that's walking the streets today. And unlike the Zapruder film in the Kennedy assassination, where it happened to be one person in the crowd who could afford the camera and was filming, we have people, and you see it on the nightly news in the 24-hour news cycle regularly now, that there are organizations picking up civilian, one-time journalist video, and it may be a national story. Now, in the city of in the county of San Diego, and I had explained this to you, they have a mutual understanding agreement where no one in the county issues media credentials. They gave all of that authority to the San Diego Police Department. Now, they give you a set of media credentials, and they give you a placard that you can put in your windshield and will let you park like handicap parking because you're the media. And you very often cannot get into news conferences without having San Diego Police Department media credentials. And I explained to you that I am opposed to the government saying who is and who is not the media. The media gets to say that, government does not. Now, if you pay particular attention to our lawsuit, it says this: we don't care if you have a policy of issuing media credentials, even though we think that it's wrong. The only thing we demand is that when I, as the president of American News and Information Services, issues a set of press credentials to one of my duly authorized representatives, that you give my credentials the same status and privileges that you give the San Diego Police Department media credentials. And then everything that has flowed since then, being arrested, being thrown out of someplace, being told to move, having your camera taken, having your video card searched, that's all part of the lawsuit. But it really comes down to, don't tell me I'm not the media. Now, because you have this opportunity, Matt, sitting in the white shirt between Rachel and I is retired Lieutenant Colonel Matt Tyszkka of the Connecticut State Police. At one time, you were the number 3 man in the Connecticut
Right.
State Police. Now, back in the 1970s, the Connecticut State Police used to issue media credentials. And there is a off-color to the left weekly newspaper in Hartford. It was called the Hartford Advocate. It published once a week. It had males looking for females, massage advertisements, whatever. Well, the Hartford Advocate went to the Connecticut State Police and said, we would like media credentials. And the state police said no. And the Hartford Advocate said, fine, we'll see you in federal court. The state police got out of the business of issuing media credentials because that was a lawsuit that they thought they could not win. I told you, when you asked me, the California Highway Patrol used to issue media credentials. And they got out of the business because there were people like me applying for them. They were denying, and there was threats of lawsuits. It actually says in a bulletin that the California Highway Patrol, CHP, have instructed their people, not very effectively, that if someone shows you as much as a business card that says, I work for American News, you have to accept that as identification of belonging to the media. So
you have to ask yourself why, when other agencies have gotten out of this business of determining who and who isn't the media, why San Diego is holding on to it like it is.
Yeah,
what benefit is it gaining from holding on
Well,
to
I-
that,
I-
except with having some kind of control over the
Over the narrative.
right, over the narrative.
in other words, Matt, if government, through the issue of media credentials, can control who gets into the media pool, who's going to be asking the questions of the speakers, by controlling the messengers, they control the message. Now, I can tell you this, as off-color and as rough around the edges as he may be, J.C. Playford, who has a YouTube account, News Now San Diego, has an uncanny way of finding out information that proves to be correct. And I told you about the burial of Amber Dubois and Gardner going to dig up the body. That came from J.C. He has a lot of people feeding him information. And when he walks into a news conference and asks a question, the people at the podium do not like his questions. Well, the rest of the media has turned into, and I'm not talking about a freelancer here, Matt. The mainstream media has turned into order takers rather than news seekers. Now, does somebody call you up and say, hey, Matt, do a story? Or do you pitch an idea for a story and you go out and do all your homework?
It happens both ways.
It does?
For me, it does at this point in my career, yeah.
Well, because you're a known commodity.
Yeah.
Now, I can tell you, I get phone calls from media outlets, and they'll say, Ed, where are you? Well, I'm in northwestern Connecticut. Ed, please, can you go to this address and put a camera on a tripod and record till we get there? Absolutely. But then again, I spend 24/7 listening to a police scanner, listening to the tone of a dispatcher's voice, listening to like, I need an ambulance and a supervisor. Well, either the officer has just had a motor vehicle accident and he's getting out to do CPR, or he shot somebody. When an officer says, I need an ambulance and a supervisor, and he doesn't come back on the radio to talk to the dispatcher, it means he's busy giving CPR, first aid, or he shot somebody.
Well,
Got any?
we do have Matt there, and maybe from a law enforcement perspective, do you think there's any circumstance in which the local authorities ought to be restricting access to media? I mean, is there a public safety issue in the decision about who should be on scene?
Well, I mean, there's two different things. You have press conferences, which I think is a large part of Ed's suit, and then you have actual crime scenes. I've been at a lot of press conferences where, some of them have been outside, so anybody can show up. I mean, we've had people there. Not everybody has a camera or a notebook. As long as nobody's creating a danger or a threat, you have your press conference. The person giving the press conference can choose to answer questions or not. It's free give and take. As Ed said, our department a long time ago, and I remember when I came on, I think they were just getting out of the business of the press credentials, and it hasn't caused a problem since.
No.
In a crime scene, you're restricting access to everybody but the actual investigators. So a press pass or press identification isn't going to get you any place inside the crime scene itself. The problem, as Ed may have explained to you in the past, is when police departments don't want people looking or videoing, what they'll do is they'll set up a crime scene, and then all of a sudden they'll start expanding it to the point of where anybody who wants to do photography or even observation is so far away from the scene that their efforts are useless. And that's a separate problem that has nothing to do necessarily with press credentials. So did I answer your question, or was there another part?
You did. And maybe I can ask you a sort of a related question. So,
Matt, before you answer the question, before you ask another question, I want to give you an answer that Matt didn't say. I wrote it down for him.
Which I can't decipher.
No, because Matt's going to agree
ahead.
with me.
Yeah, go ahead.
In a tactical barricade hostage situation, the media is kept a distance away because of capabilities of doing live on YouTube, live on Facebook, that the person inside the house can go on Facebook and see where the police are moving if you're near the command center or you're too close and you're shooting the tactical operations of public safety. I do agree that officer safety and public safety personnel safety is paramount. But when he talks about a crime scene, and I've said this repeatedly, a crime scene is defined by the evidence field or a debris field, but you can't put a crime tape up at the Arizona line on Route 8 when there's a homicide on the coast in San Diego. Go ahead, ask your question.
So my question is, in Connecticut, you don't do press credentialing in the same way that the county of San Diego does.
Absolutely not.
You've said that you used to do it that way, but it doesn't seem to have been a loss to change it. Now, another difference in the way that law enforcement interacts with credentials and permitting in San Diego as opposed to in Connecticut is that California is a may-issue state for concealed carry permits. California is a may-issue state.
Yes.
And in Connecticut, there's not the same process of local discretion in the law enforcement authorities about
Suitability.
decide who should be issued a permit, right?
Well, there is. There is. In Connecticut, you obtain a temporary permit, which is your initial permit through the local issuing authority, which is either your chief of police or the first selectman. Once you obtain that, then you get your permanent 5-year pistol permit through the state police. and there are disqualifiers. You know, everybody knows them: felony, standing protective order, all those
Illegal
kind of things.
alien.
But then we have a suitability requirement. So your local issuing authority does look at this non-defined suitability requirement.
Well, let me clarify that, Matt, because obviously I do know what's going on in San Diego. In San Diego, they wanted you to be a resident. They did not require you to have a domicile there. They just said a resident. You had to have good cause, and you had to be of good moral character. Now, if you look at the good moral character aspect of the application in San Diego, that is very similar to the discretion that's used in Connecticut regarding suitability.
But we don't have the good cause.
We don't have good cause.
Right.
We walk in and we say, we want a permit. The chief says, why? You can say, none of your business. Am I a suitable person? Am I disqualified? No. Give me my permit.
Right. So in other words, the chief in Connecticut has some discretion, but he has to articulate it. It looks like in San Diego it goes way past that to where the chief on any given day can say yay or nay depending on how he feels.
Well, what happened was I applied,
Yeah.
and I had told you this. My San Diego story really began with the 2 years I spent at Rachel Baird's hip prior to going out and applying, because I was involved in firearm issues, Second Amendment issues, and I became very knowledgeable before I ever went out there.
Well, we were involved in a lot of board of firearm permit
Right.
examiner
We were, that's right. We were cleaning up a lot of stuff and getting involved in a lot of stuff here. But my knowledge that I carried into San Diego about Second Amendment rights was key to my application process. I applied. I was told, don't bother applying. You're going to lose your money. I said, don't worry about the money. Here's my application. Here's my money. And they charged me 100% of the fee when by law they were only supposed to charge me 15% of the fee and collect the balance upon issuance. So they had to give me a refund check. So I won that issue. And then they had the residency issue. And they said, you're not a resident of San Diego. You own a house up in Los Angeles. Go apply up there or go someplace else. I said, I maintain a residence in San Diego, and I knew from being with Rachel that an individual may have more than one residence, but only one domicile.
Yeah.
You got a beach cottage for the wintertime and a cottage up at Lake Tahoe in the summertime. Now, so I knew that the residency issue, so I filed my lawsuit initially and then they said I didn't have good cause. I have never had my moral character questioned by San Diego because I had permits issued by other states, but they didn't question my moral character. They questioned my good cause.
Well, so, and that's an important distinction, that discretion, the local law enforcement exercising their discretion in issuing these permits can examine a few different criteria in different jurisdictions. So in San Diego, it's good cause, and then there's also a moral character question in Connecticut. There's not a good cause requirement. But depending on how Peruta v. California gets decided, it could have an effect of sort of eliminating the may issue standard in the whole country. I mean, it could be that all states become a shall issue rule for these permits, and that there would be no local law enforcement discretion for moral character or for any of these other categories. And I'm just wondering, if that were the outcome of this case, if all states became shall issue states, I'm wondering, first of all, Mr. Peruta, whether that's how do you feel about that outcome? If
Matt, I'm going to say something. I know where you're going, and I'm going to say something very funny to you right now. This is going to create people on the other side of the camera are probably going to laugh when I say this. how do I say to Matt on live internet broadcast, can we do this off the record?
Yeah, no, I
You
don't
know,
think so.
so I can't talk to you off the record. So I guess I got to
Okay,
talk
I
to
mean,
you.
if you don't want to answer the question,
No,
you
no,
can
no, no. Listen. I feel safe and secure in what I say and how I say it, and I haven't used the F word, so you're not Mother Jones.
Yeah.
Now, let me explain what I think is going to happen here. I believe that there's one or two more conferences where they can report out during this term.
Yep.
They're either going to accept my case for argument, or they're going to reject it and send it back down, letting the decision of the Ninth Circuit stand.
Yep.
Now, I got two things to say.
Okay.
I believe that the publicity and issues involved in Peruta v. San Diego / California was on a lot of people's mind prior to November 8th. They realized the importance of the makeup of the Supreme Court, and my case may have contributed in a small way to the election of President Donald Trump, my president. Now, having said that, I believe and I would hope that if the Supreme Court, in their infinite wisdom, decides that they don't want to hear Peruta v. California, that it will excite the imagination of members of Congress to enact reciprocity across this country. In other words, to every action, there's a reaction. I would hope that if the Supreme Court fails to take my case, that President Donald Trump would blow his bugle and tweet at 3 a.m. with the denial of Peruta being heard, we need reciprocity across the country. Because if that happens, Matt, my Connecticut permit will permit me to carry in Sheriff Gore's county.
Right.
So, to every action, there's a reaction. And I'm not looking at anything from a negative point of view. I believe that in some small way, the makeup of the Supreme Court was critical to owners of firearms, and my case was right there on the top of the pile for everybody to see.
I mean, if you think about the way the patchwork of firearm laws are in this country and the impact it can sometimes have, I had a hearing in Massachusetts last Monday on the denial of a pistol permit to somebody who has permits in 5 other states. And among those 5 other states are permits that allow him overall to carry in 40 states. So this man can carry in 40 out of 50 states, and he sought an out-of-state resident pistol permit from Massachusetts, and it was denied because his personality and the personality of the Firearms Bureau head did not mesh. In other words, she thought he was negative and condescending towards her when he asked her questions about the validity of the questions on the questionnaire and whether they violated the Second Amendment. And so she said he was negative, condescending, and not respectful of Massachusetts laws, therefore he was not suitable. Meanwhile, 40 other states believe he's suitable to carry a handgun. And that's the ridiculousness of what happens when you have these different laws all over the country.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I spoke to a police chief in Massachusetts in a suburb of Boston in the course of doing my research for this story, and I said, if depending on the way that this case is decided, Peruta v. California, it could affect your discretion as a chief law enforcement officer in the Boston area to deny permits to some applicants who otherwise meet the criteria, except that you don't want to give them a permit for one reason or another. And I said, how is that would that mean to you? And he said that in some cases, they know people who have not been convicted of a crime, but they've been out on calls, just domestic violence calls, et cetera, to their home. And so they know some people in their own community who are uncomfortable with holding a permit to carry a gun. I don't know if you have any reaction to that. It's an attitude that's out there, or perhaps Matt, from your perspective as a law enforcement professional, whether or not this losing that discretion in Connecticut would have any consequences that other than positive consequences.
Well, it would have a positive impact because, in other words, the burden should be on the issuing authority to state exactly why they do not want to issue a permit. And as you say, there probably are some valid rejections. A person that the police have gone to their house a number of times, they seem mentally unstable, or they just, they have fights with people, they're antisocial or whatever. That may, in fact, be valid. But if they're otherwise not a prohibited person, then the discretion should be gone. The chief should say, okay, there's no prohibited items here that would cause me to not issue the permit. Therefore, I have to issue the permit. And I don't think anybody sees anything wrong with that. But like in California, Ed said, you could be up in Los Angeles County and ask
Sacramento.
Sacramento and get a permit and legally carry down in San Diego. Whereas if you live in San Diego, you can't carry in San Diego.
I had asked you one
Can't get a
time.
permit.
I had asked you.
Can I interject one thing?
He's going to give a number.
Okay.
I had asked you one time to find out how many permits were issued in the state of California. Have you been able to find that out?
Well, I thought that what you had asked me was how many permits had been issued in the county of San Diego as compared to Connecticut, because they're about the same geographic.
Right, and you got what?
the same
Maybe
population.
1,700 or 1,200 in San Diego.
Yeah, and about 170,000 in Connecticut.
Right, 178,000. I thought it was 278,000,
Well,
but
it's about 255
200.
or
It's
60,000 in Connecticut.
278,000 in Connecticut.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess that these numbers, depending on what year you're looking at, are going to be changing a little bit. But the source that I looked at said 170,000 active permits in Connecticut.
Boy, that's old. That's old information, Matt.
Yeah, I checked in December, and it was around 255,000 for all permits.
Who'd you check with? Who do you
Legal
Firearms
affairs.
unit, SLFU.
I'm going to give you a number, Matt. You ready?
Yeah.
860-685-8150.
Okay.
Christina at State Police will answer the phone. Ask her to speak to Janet Ainsworth. AINSWORTH. Attorney Janet Ainsworth. And she's the one who always gets me the current number.
Okay, and so my response to this question about, well, what about the local police chiefs who
I'm going to take a break.
who know in their discretion that there are certain people where they've gone to calls to their house or they have a reputation for being volatile? How do you respond to that? Well, the way I respond to that is the way I respond to most questions like that. If these police chiefs can articulate their concerns and take their concerns to their legislative representative and get a bill passed that says, you know what, if a police chief has been to a house on this many occasions and whatever, then that puts these people in a prohibited category. But we know that can't be done because it's just too ambiguous. And anything that's that ambiguous obviously shouldn't be the basis for a decision. But if there are things that the chiefs can articulate that should prohibit somebody from having a pistol permit, and it isn't on the list of prohibited acts, then they should take it to their legislature and say, we need to add this to the list of prohibited acts that disqualifies somebody from having a permit. But the problem is, the things we're talking about, they're not going to be able to do that. There is It's just to tell you, discretion is a problem, and this is why discretion's a problem. We have a first selectman in Connecticut in the town of Bozrah, Bozrah, who was arrested for domestic violence because he sat in wait with a gun ready to shoot his wife and had written letters indicating so. He was granted the Family Violence Education Program, and it took him a year to get through the program. He remained the first selectman for the town of Bozrah in charge of issuing permits to other people when he was not eligible to have a permit because he had a protective order over him. And of course, because of who he was, I think, and because he was the first selectman and a former state trooper, his case was dismissed. And he's still the first selectman making suitability decisions about other people. And so, you have to look at the people making the decisions. You have to look at why they're making the decisions. And discretion, it's just too dangerous when it comes to a fundamental constitutional right. Articulate it, pass it as law, and then use it. But if you can't even articulate it enough to get it passed as law, then it shouldn't be a factor used in disqualifying people from exercising their Second Amendment right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Hey Matt, was this ambush planned?
Ambush? I hope it doesn't feel like an ambush. I mean, you told me you had a talk show and that you talk about political issues and people call in. I thought it was okay to call in.
It is okay.
I thought it was good. That's good.
I just need to give credit where credit is due.
Okay.
I'd like to thank Attorney Rachel Baird for teaching me the basics before I went into San Diego. I'd like to thank Paul Newharth, the attorney who initially took my case. I'd like to thank Chuck Michelle, Long Beach, California, for coming down and offering to carry my case forward. I'd like to thank the NRA, and I'd like to thank the Second Amendment Foundation, the Calguns Foundation, and all of the people on the internet that talk on message boards, Maryland shooters, New Jersey, people that are all talking about my case and send messages to me, hoping that I'm successful.
Well, our own Connecticut Citizens Defense League here in Connecticut has written an amicus brief in support of your petition for
I would
cert,
like to
and
thank
that meant a lot.
I would like to thank the NRA, ILA. I'd like to thank Chris Cox, Chris Conti, the people that I've met at NRA conventions, Wayne LaPierre, because I was a member and shooting NRA competitive learning at 9 years old for the Capital City Rifle Club. And when I got into combat, I knew how to shoot. And the article in the Sea Tiger paper in the spring of 1968, the title was Marines Marksmanship Impresses the Enemy. And I learned how to shoot when I was small. And it saved my life in combat. I don't think I ever fired my M16 or M14 on automatic. I never used it. It was always one round, one kill.
Yeah.
One round aimed well is better than spraying a bunch of bullets. But what I'm saying to you is this. Regardless of what happens at the Supreme Court, please, may the President of the United States, my President of the United States, tweet at 3 o'clock in the morning to every member of Congress and remind them that there were good guys with guns on the baseball diamond when they were trying to practice for a baseball game.
Well, I just want to say as well, and this goes back to your involvement in First Amendment activities, that we're going to be watching SCOTUS blog, and who's the
Amy Howe.
Amy Howe. She live blogs, while the decisions are coming out at 9:30 on Monday morning, as we have been for weeks now. But we're also going to be watching the Connecticut Judicial website at 11:30 a.m. because they're going to release a decision. We got notice of this on Friday. They're going to release a decision in State versus Patel, Patel. And this is a trial that we recorded back in January and February, where we had permission from the court to record it, but there were limitations put on what we could record, which included testimony from the chief medical examiner, testimony from a victim,
Exhibits.
and those kind of things. And when Ed went up to the court to obtain copies of the exhibits, which are public documents in Connecticut, he was denied access to copies of those exhibits, which included photographs.
Full exhibits.
And when I questioned what order had instructed the clerk not to release those copies of exhibits to you, they relied on the court order regarding your recording in the courtroom of the testimony and evidence. And I said, no, that's not how it works. The practice book has certain rules that pertain to recording in the courtroom, and the practice book has certain rules that pertain to sealing documents. And these documents were never sealed. They're public documents, and he has a right to get copies of them. And we took it up.
Rachel filed an appeal.
We took it up to the appellate court.
Argued the appeal.
And we argued the appeal. There were 3 judges, Judge Prescott, Judge Sheldon, and Judge Keller. And we received an order about a month later saying the decision was 2-1. Judge Prescott and Judge Keller ruled in our favor that the practice book provisions were not followed, that there was never a sealing order, and you were improperly denied those public exhibits. And there's going to be a dissenting opinion by Judge Prescott. But we
Judge Sheldon.
Judge Sheldon. So we've been waiting for the written opinions, and it's been at least...
It's going to be released on Monday.
It's been at least 4 months we've
It's
been
just
waiting.
another case of I questioned authority.
So we're going to be waiting to read those decisions Monday at 11:30.
And that's going to be a big case in Connecticut.
I think we're very excited about it. So there's a lot going on. We haven't even talked about your case against the city of Hartford for expanding the crime.
He saw
scenes.
Kelsey Street and Park Street.
Okay, so yeah, no, I'm so pleased. To
He
be
saw
able to
New
talk
Britain
about.
walk away with my camera and tripod.
I'm pleased to talk about.
Yeah.
I love talking about our First Amendment activities.
1245, Matt.
Yeah.
First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, and Fifth Amendment. You know, I fought for them, I defended them, and you're not going to take them away from me. But please,
Yep.
put in the article that I'm asking my president, to tweet at 3 o'clock in the morning if things go south at the Supreme Court, to tweet to everybody, we need reciprocal agreement across the country.
All right. Well, it looks like there's going to be a lot of exciting stuff to watch on Monday of this coming week, and you're right in the middle of it.
I am.
As always.
But I'm not losing sleep over this. Because to
right.
every action, there's a reaction.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for chatting with me.
Well, thank you for
Oh,
calling.
Thanks
We
for
enjoyed
calling,
it.
man.
And for the record, I did not drop one F-bomb during this entire
No, you didn't.
program.
No.
Of course, you weren't on for the first hour.
Kudos, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Have a great weekend,
Matt, you stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care, Matt.
bye-bye.
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 Well, that was interesting.
That was.
Yeah.
We hadn't anticipated that, actually.
I'm probably going to catch some shit because he called into the show, but I'm not gonna not interact with a caller.
Right.
What's the problem with him calling? I
Well,
thought it was good.
look,
He asked good
look.
questions.
You did.
You know, Mother Jones did a hatchet job on me.
Oh, well. Yeah.
And, you know, there's another person out there that tries to take things that I say and twist them around to promote his own agenda.
You know what, Ed? When you are in the public eye, that happens.
It does.
And nobody has inspired me more than President Trump to just stick to it and try to ignore what people say about it. Because if people aren't saying negative things about you, then you're probably not really doing anything meaningful. That's
Well,
the way I take that.
Yeah, well, like
Matt.
they say, if you're not
Whoa, whoa,
getting
whoa,
any
whoa.
ink at all, it's
Whoa.
a bad thing. So
Matt.
good or bad.
Right.
Give a blurb
Yeah.
to the show. Give a blurb to summary judgment on Saturdays.
That's
you
right.
know, at on YouTube.
Right. This is where you got your information.
Yeah.
Quote the source, summary judgment, right?
Yep. You want to know something? Call in and ask.
Exactly.
So what else is going on this week in Connecticut or national news, Matt?
I don't know. What is going on in Connecticut?
Yeah.
Well, besides the not having a budget yet.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, you know, that's
The
still
far-
going
the
on.
far- yeah, let's go from the national news down to the ultra or micro local news. I know Farmington rejected a referendum bill yesterday to
New high school.
to build a new high
New
school
high
for
school?
$184 million. And when I saw those signs that said 184 million, I said, that sign is very effective, and I predict people are going to say no. It was. You saw those zeros, you're like, oh my God, no, we can't afford that. It was effective.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of okay. Are there problems in Vermont that we don't know about in what's known as a constitutional carry state? In other words,
No.
you walk in, you're not a prohibited person, you buy a firearm, whether it's a handgun or a long gun, you walk out. You want to carry it, you carry it. You carry it openly, you carry it concealed. It's a constitutional carry state. Is there bloodshed on the streets of Vermont?
Well, I asked that woman from the Firearms Bureau in Massachusetts last Monday when I had the hearing, and I said, well, when you made a determination that he wasn't suitable because he was condescending and negative with you on the phone and asked too many questions, did you notify the 5 states where he has a permit and say, my God, you got a problem here. This person has a permit. He's condescending, negative, asked too many questions. And she said, well, no, I didn't contact those states because they're shall issue states. And good answer, smart answer, I get it. But on the other hand, if you really think somebody presents a danger where you're not going to give them a permit and it's based on a real fear, why wouldn't you notify
It doesn't
these other
fit in with
states?
see something, say something.
It does not fit in with see something, say something.
Right.
You're correct.
Right.
Yeah, she knew something supposedly about this person, but she didn't spread it around to other law enforcement.
Well,
I don't know.
We have approximately 5 minutes left of the program, and I've started to end the program a little early so that I can put stuff at the end when we give it to the cable
Now,
channels.
Matt, you're not going to be here next week.
No, that's correct. I won't be here next week. I will be here the week after.
Okay, well,
Going out on some secret mission, boss?
No, the usual radio field day,
Oh.
emergency communication test. So
Oh, I can't. Are you going to videotape?
What's
any
going
of
on
that?
with
I wanna know
Dre?
about
I
that.
Hey,
can.
This
You
is
do
real.
that.
This is really local. What's going on with you and Pat considering the move to Georgia?
Oh, not to Georgia. I mean, we looked at it. We're looking at New Hampshire.
Oh, nice. Closer.
Another state with very low taxes.
Low taxes, low fees, or actually, property tax is the only tax you really pay up there. They don't have
Well,
a
I gotta
sales
tell you.
tax, no income tax.
I got to tell you, people are leaving Connecticut.
Well,
They
Brooke,
have to.
Brooke was talking about that.
And-
I forgot to ask her.
And
but yeah.
I have heard from a number of people who worked for lengthy periods of time, built up a very good 401k or IRA account, get a good, decent retirement, and they're sitting there saying, I'm not going to have the state of Connecticut ripping apart my retirement check to support freewheeling spending. And I've heard a lot of people say they're moving out.
Yeah, I don't blame them. I mean, I hate to. I've lived here all my life, but I've got to go someplace where my dollar will go at least a decent distance. You know, they're killing us down here with
I
all
got to
kinds
tell
of
you though,
stuff.
after I lived in South Carolina for 6 years, and moving from here to Georgia, I think is just a huge, huge change that you have to be ready for.
It is.
I'm not sure.
Oh,
how,
yeah.
I'm not sure how people do
Well,
it.
look at me.
It's
You know,
huge.
I grew up in the shadow of Lexington and Concord. I grew up in a Constitution state. You know, I've been to the graves of the Patriots in Boston, and I always heard that California was a progressive state, that it was just so modern, it was so good.
Yeah.
Until I went out there and started talking to them, the people that worked for government, and I go, Jesus Christ, where did these people come from? and they don't know me, and I don't know them.
Well, I got to tell you, Si, I do love Southern California. Fashion Island out in Newport.
Fashion Island.
Oh my God, we don't have anything like that in Connecticut.
Well, the weather is great out there.
Matt,
I have to admit
I have
that.
never purchased a $500 pair of shoes.
I suppose we know somebody who has, right?
She still has them.
Oh, I just got that Fashion Island fever when I was out there.
No, the saleswoman came up and said how good you looked
Oh,
in them.
those are beautiful.
And yeah, well, I'll take them.
And they actually are. So we will see you Monday morning for the morning report at 7 to 7:30
And
a.m.
again, Matt from Politico, plug this show. Hopefully all of your viewers or your readers will tune in and ask questions or bring their issues to Rachel. And please, put in there that I'm asking my president to tweet at 3 o'clock. Reciprocal agreement is needed.
Okay. Have a great
Great.
week, everybody.
Have a great
Bye-bye.
week. Thanks
Take
for
it easy.
watching. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.